These images have been circulating everywhere, and that's because everyone's paying attention to the latest infectious disease outbreak that's spreading globally, monkeypox. The region is on high alert, and Barbados' Ministry of Health and Wellness says it's in a state of vigilance. But what exactly is monkeypox?
Monkeypox is a disease caused by the monkeypox virus, and this virus is related to the smallpox virus, which, as we know, was eradicated from the world by, I think, 1980 using a worldwide vaccination scheme.
That's Dr Brendan Larder, virologist out of the United Kingdom, who we spoke with about monkeypox and how the world is handling the outbreak.
This virus is native to Africa, and it was first discovered in monkeys, but it's mainly found in rodents in Africa. So the name is kind of a bit of a misnomer in some ways. There are two subtypes of monkeypox virus. One is the Central African, and another one is called the West African subtype.
Okay, so how is it spread?
Naturally amongst rodents and other animals in Africa, and the rodent is the normal reservoir of the virus, but occasionally it jumps from animal to human, much probably as the virus that caused COVID did, and humans can become infected, and there are small outbreaks that have been noted in Africa over the years. But this is transmission from animals to humans. But more rarely, you can see person-to-person spread. But as I said, this is very rare. And spread is through close person-to-person contact, or contact with clothing or bedding from an infected person, or contact with droplets that have been coughed or breathed out from an infected person. It's probably spread now because of international travel, and possibly been noticed because it's been spread amongst certain individuals who have become in close contact, and small outbreaks have occurred in certain countries in the world.
Okay, when we hear monkeypox, some people may automatically come to their mind what sounds similar chickenpox. Is there any similarity?
Well, there is, and I think it's worth considering what the monkeypox symptoms are. Once you get infected, the incubation period is quite long. It's between about 5 and 21 days. So it's longer, so for example, than the incubation period of the COVID virus. And the initial symptoms tend to be fever, headache, muscle aches, backache, and importantly, swollen glands, neck glands, chills, and feeling very tired, fatigue, which are all kind of generic symptoms from many virus infections, including chickenpox. Although the swollen glands tends to be something that's very particular for monkeypox. And then later on, and the reason why it can be confused with chickenpox, the later symptoms, which appear 1 to about 5 days after the initial symptoms, are rash. And this rash can be mistaken for a chickenpox rash. It tends to be on the face and on the body, and quite characteristically on the palms of the hand as well. These are raised spots at first, and then they form blisters with fluid in, again, a lot like chickenpox. And finally, the blisters form scabs, and then the infection can tend to resolve and disappear. There are some differences between chickenpox and monkeypox. Firstly, as I said, the swollen glands, and secondly, the rash with monkeypox tends to appear mainly all at the same time, rather than a gradual spread from the face with chickenpox and then down to the trunk of the body, etc. So there are some differences, and there can be differences in severity of the disease as well. But the other thing as well, in terms of thinking about whether an outbreak of what looks like chickenpox is actual chickenpox or monkeypox is the actual population that the outbreak occurs in. Chickenpox usually occurs in the younger population, in children, and monkeypox in adults. But it's not, I mean, that's not a all or nothing, but that's generally what is seen.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has alerted that monkeypox appears to be spreading among gay and bisexual men. Dr. Larder shared his thoughts on this finding.
I don't think so. I think it's just particular behaviour, really. It's close to close, personal contact. And I guess what you're referring to is hit the headlines over in the UK is seeing outbreaks amongst gay homosexual men. That's not because the virus is targeting those people, but it's just really, I guess, that I would have thought that amongst a cohort of friends or contacts within some homosexual circles, there have been a person who's been infected, and perhaps there's been some sort of super spreader event. And so that's amplified the infections amongst that group. And that's how we've been able to see it and to detect it. So I don't think it's not something that's actually targeting gays or homosexuals. In the same way that HIV didn't. I mean, it was a behavioural. It wasn't the virus that was targeting people. It was just the way the virus was spread.
He explained that testing for monkeypox is very similar to testing for COVID-19.
So detection is by swabbing of the blisters and also the throat, and also taking blood and urine samples, and the virus can be detected by PCR testing, very similar to the PCR testing that is carried out with COVID. The current smallpox vaccine is about 85% effective or successful in preventing monkeypox infection and in stopping it spreading, because the viruses are very closely related. Infected people can be treated actually with the smallpox vaccine, which helps to alleviate symptoms and to lessen severity. And there are also a number of available antiviral drugs that can be used to treat people with more severe cases.
What are the global trends seeing with this spread? What is it looking like in the future in terms of transmission across the world?
From my understanding, the current outbreak, there are around about something over 200 cases have been detected outside of Africa in at least 18 countries, different countries. What's going to happen in the future, or should we be worried? I guess the answer to that is yes and no. I would have thought that this outbreak is unlikely to develop into a pandemic, which is what we have seen similar to COVID, as this virus simply isn't as infectious in humans as the SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes COVID, and doesn't spread as easily. The virus itself is known as a DNA virus. That's the genetic makeup of the virus. And DNA viruses don't tend to mutate or vary or produce variants as much as RNA viruses. And as we know, the virus that causes COVID is an RNA virus, and that changes and mutates very easily. But I should say that this doesn't mean that we should be complacent. I think we should be vigilant and be aware of the symptoms, and have diagnostic testing available, the PCR testing, and also have treatments, including the vaccine stocks of vaccine ready in case we see further spread in specific countries and around the world.
He also shared what countries should do to be prepared against an outbreak.
Well, I mean, at the moment, I think it's really awareness of the symptoms and awareness of how the virus is being spread. And knowing that it's close person-to-person contact with, as I said, people's clothes or bedding from infected people. I mean that's very specific and kind of quite intimate, if you like, which is different from COVID. So you can't really put protocols in place and say to people who don't have intimate contact, that's not really a feasible protocol. I think it's just awareness of symptoms, and authorities and medical authorities being able to have the tools to detect and diagnose the virus very quickly if it does outbreak, if you do see an outbreak, and then to contact trace and to isolate any persons who are infected. And actually, people who contact known infected people should really isolate for at least 21 days. So that's a protocol, and I think that's something that's being introduced into the UK now. Is in terms of the quarantine and isolation of people who are infected and people who are contacts of infected persons.